Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Andrew Bunting. Andrew is the curator of the Scott Arboretum at Swarthmore College, where he's been curator for 25 years there. And if you've never been up there, if you go up to the Philadelphia area, you've got to go by Swarthmore. It's got an incredible campus arboretum. It's worth the trip alone to see the amphitheater there. It's maybe one of my absolute favorite outdoor spaces. He also owns a great design build company, Fine Garden Creations, which just found out today. He almost got lucky enough to get our Lizzie Lathers, but she came here instead, so we're awfully happy about that. Andrew also has been the curator of the Chanticleer Foundation in Wayne, Pennsylvania, and if you've ever been there, it's one of the fantastic gardens of the country. And his home garden that he's going to be speaking about, Belvidere, is featured in This Old House magazine and the Wall Street Journal. Andrew is extremely active in public horticulture. He has served as the chair in the North American Plant Collections Consortium, and is currently the lead curator in the multi-institution Magnolia Collection, which we're also a part of with that group. He's been with the Delaware Center for Horticulture as chair, president of the Magnolia Society International, just all kinds of things. He's written over 100 articles for all the horticulture magazines that you know, Fine Gardening, Horticulture, American Gardener, Public Garden, Arnoldia, everyone you can think of. He is a fantastic plantsman. You know you're going to love this. I'm really excited to get a glimpse into his own personal garden, which is different from a lot of public horticulturists where you see their public face and what they do. But this is a little more intimate and private. And you need to come back again next year. He's going to be back down speaking to the Rock Garden Society about some of his plant collecting trips. So you'll have a chance to see a completely different aspect of Andrew. So please welcome Andrew to the Jc Raulston.
Can you hear me in the back? Is that good? All right, great. Well, it's a real honor to be here tonight at the Jc Raulston Arboretum. When I first started at the Scott Arboretum in '86, JC every year would bring his students to the Arboretum. He would do kind of a whole Delaware Valley horticulture, I think a week. I think they would come for quite a while, and he would always bring them to the Arboretum. We would have lunch, do a tour, and then in the early 90s, I think it was 93, he invited our entire staff here for kind of a retreat. So I think there was probably about 10 of us, and we all stayed at JC's house for 3 days, and he really rolled out the red carpet, and you know, he had dinners for us. He opened the door to a bunch of local nurseries, other local public gardens, and then over the years he would also send plants to us. And I think if we queried our system, we would find that probably hundreds of our woody plants today are the result of plants that he would distribute. And usually once a year we would get a little box. It was maybe like a foot by foot by foot. And in it were these tiny little plants. I mean, they were probably like 2-inch pots. And I remember I was telling Mark earlier, we got one in '93, and then it was Eustaphus japonica, which is now like 20 feet tall. Polyothersis sinensis was in that '93 box. And then also in that box was this tiny little seedling of Magnolia denudata, which he had collected as a few seeds from a tree at the Beijing Botanic Garden. And we grew it on. And today it's, actually when I left this morning, it was in full flower. And even though it's only 21 years old from a tiny little seedling, it's 40 feet tall. And it has a real kind of spire shape. So we named it Swarthmore Sentinel. So, you know, we've really been the beneficiary of both JC's generosity as well, and subsequently from the Jc Raulston Arboretum. So, thank you for having me this evening. So, my presentation is basically to walk you through the development of my home garden, which is in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. Swarthmore is just a little bit south of Philadelphia. It's about zone 7, or it's been changed to zone 7. at my home as well as at the Arboretum, because of walls and things like that, I do try Zone 8 things and see if I can get away with them. So I'll just kind of walk you through the development of the gardens. This is not really kind of a lecture where there's lots of plant names. I think the only 2 slides I have labeled are the first one and the last one. And everything in between are kind of pretty pictures, and we'll kind of recap the development of my garden. So when I moved there in 1999, this is what it looked like. And you know, I had rented for years, so I hadn't really, the last gardening I had done the last gardening I had done for myself was, you know, vegetable gardening at my parents' house, but I'd never really had a garden to myself. So this one was kind of one of the last houses in Swarthmore that was affordable. Swarthmore's kind of upper middle class, and most of the houses are well out of my price range. So when I bought this, I don't even think I realized how much work had to be done on the house. I was just so excited to have a house. So one of the first things I did was just kind of assess the landscape and pick the plants that were there that I thought I should keep. And there really weren't that many. There was a Japanese maple here, and there was another one in the back. These tall Norway spruces, dogwood off of the garage. But the rest of it was like beds of pachysandra, yew bushes, dead trees. When I first moved in the back, there had been some time between when I bought the house and when I actually took ownership. And when I went back, the whole backyard was like 8 feet tall with pokeweed. So I was a little daunted by that. So what I did in the very beginning is I drew out a little sketch that showed the house and the garage and the kind of different garden spaces, and kind of looked at light conditions on the property. And I developed a plan for what I wanted in the garden. So in the front, I thought I would have it a bit more cottagey. In the back, I would have a couple borders, a perennial border, a tropical section, a little vegetable garden, a woodland garden, a pond, a compost area. And pretty much where I drew all those out is kind of the way it is more or less today. And so I started with the front yard. Here's the backyard as well. So there was a huge stump. This was a silver maple. You know, the house needed, you know, to be painted. I had it inspected, and the inspector said, "Oh yeah, the roof is fine. It'll last 7 more years." And I went in there. I was only in like a week, and it was raining. And I was in this bedroom here, and I saw a little water dripping from the ceiling. And I went up and I touched, and the entire ceiling collapsed, and all this water poured into the bedroom. So I already spent every last cent I had on the house, and then I had to dole out, you know, $7,000 more to fix the roof. So in the beginning, it was, you know, I think again because I was so excited to have a new property, I wasn't really paying attention to how much work the yard really needed. As Mark mentioned, I have a landscaping business. This is an associate of mine, Bill Conwell, who I knew had a bobcat. So I made a deal with him to come over and help me with the patio. So I thought, you know, one of the first things I would like to do is create a space off the back of the house, which would be, you know, a sitting area, an area for some furniture. I really like tropical plants, so I thought that would be a nice venue for containers and so forth. And if you ever do a patio, you know, if you think you need a 10 by 10 patio, I would just double the dimensions. Because a 10 by 10 patio, 100 square feet, once you put a couple containers and a chair or two on it, you know, it really shrinks down to virtually no space whatsoever. So I did I think it's about, it's the width of the house, so I think it's 35 feet long, and maybe it's 12 feet wide, and even so, with all the pots and things on it now, it probably could have been even a bit more generous. And in our part of the country, we have, you can either use brick, you could use field stone, but a material that a lot of people use is slate or Pennsylvania bluestone, which is a beautiful kind of bluish-gray stone that really goes well with almost any type of house style. You can actually see here the new roof is in that picture. So this was probably in the fall of that year, so fall of '99. Also, after I went, there's kind of two approaches that people recommend for a new garden. One is to buy your house and just live in it for a year and assess kind of the light conditions and moisture in the yard and how the different plants survive and how well they do. But I knew from the get-go which plants I wanted to keep and which ones I didn't. So the first thing I did was just eliminate everything that I didn't want. So there was these beds of pachysandra ivy, a few scraggly trees, and so forth. So I thought it would be easier for me to just clean it and have a clean slate, and then start to put in the different elements that I wanted as my finances would allow me to. But one of the first things I did was I planted Cryptomeria japonica yoshino, and I planted 6 of them. So there's kind of 2 here, 3 in the back, and 1 off to the back side. Because I thought it'd be good to establish some trees early on, knowing that they would take longer to mature. So here it is coming together. The house, I guess in that period I had the house painted as well, which helped quite a bit. It went from kind of a pretty rough looking house to a reasonable looking house. And then this is actually probably only like the next year. Because what I did with all that where the pokeweed was and the dead grass is, just to get something in that looked decent, I sodded the backyard. And again, there's 2 approaches. You can sod or seed. I decided to sod because I knew if I seeded it, it would probably half would come up seed and half would be all the latent or dormant weed seeds that have been laying there for the last 50 years. And with tropical plants, you can really make kind of an instant effect in the garden. And that's what I also did with some of these big beds. This is actually a detached garage here. So in these big open areas, for the first couple of years, I just filled with tropical plants for the summertime, which gave some sense of that the garden was a little maturer than it actually was. And even today, I still use the patio for entertaining, but I also use it as a venue to have containers. And I use a lot of traditional kind of terracotta containers, but other containers made out of metal and so forth that were never intended to be an ornamental container, but the only thing you really need a container to do to hold plants is have drainage and to be able to hold the soil. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that was intended to be an ornamental container. You can see this is probably a few years on. Here's one of the cryptomerias, another one here. And then along this fence here, and these are actually quite large now. This is a deciduous high hedge of Carpinus betulus Franz Fontaine. My yard is only 1/3 of an acre, and I like trees, but you can't really put an arboretum in 1/3 of an acre. So I've made a deal with my neighbors that I'll buy the plant, I'll plant the plant, but I'll plant it in their yard. So I then can kind of control my views. They think that I'm just doing it because I like that tree. They don't really know that I'm trying to screen their house. Here's that tropical border again. This garage is you'll see this a bit later, but this garage is it's kind of 2 cars deep, but it's not really big enough for a car. So I'd always had, even from the get-go, kind of an idea of kind of redeveloping that building into a summer house, kind of an outdoor building that could be used during the spring, summer, and fall. And then back here you can see the other large Japanese maple, just regular Acer palmatum. And some of the plants in my garden are very ordinary. Like this is just a hedge of Ilex crenata steeds. Ilex crenata is probably one of the most common plants on the planet, but it really serves a utilitarian purpose to kind of make the patio into a garden room And so when you're sitting on the patio, you don't necessarily see the rest of the garden, and vice versa. And I use all sorts of tropical plants, a lot of bromeliads. This is an Acmea. This is South African Melianthus major. And each year they differ depending on what I can get. If you have any questions as we go, just feel free to yell them out. This is a little entrance to the basement, just kind of a covered entrance. I use a lot of agaves. This is one called Joe Hope. I actually buy, I think, almost all my agaves from Plant Delights Nursery. And agaves are great. You can just get a small plant, pot in like a 6 to 8 inch pot, set it out in the garden, and you don't even really have to water it much. This is a variegated Brugmansia. This is Alocasia portadora. And in Swarthmore, almost all the basements are moist, because there's a lot of underground streams that were buried during different phases of construction throughout the town. So most basements have kind of, not a steady stream of water, but definitely when it rains, the water comes through the walls. So they're not really functional for much of anything other than overwintering tropical plants. So we're just cold enough that things like cannas can't be left out for the winter, or the elephant ears, or bananas. So those I dig up, go down. This is an entrance to the basement, and I just put them down in this kind of cool, damp, almost cellar-like atmosphere for the winter time. These are phormiums, New Zealand flax. I use those from time to time. Diaceas are great for their seasonal flowers. So the next frontier after the patio is the front of the house. And again, this is probably the fall of '99. And what's great about owning a landscape company is when the landscaping side of the business is slow, you can have them come over to your house and do all the grunt work. So they, probably just one weekend I had them come over and help rip out shrubs and so forth. What I wanted to do around the foundation of the house was, I thought that would be a good spot for kind of connoisseur, smaller, kind of rare, or what, at least at the time, were kind of rare shrubs. Today, it's completely filled in. And then in the front, I wanted, in the lawn area, I thought I would have a walkway that came up from the sidewalk, and then do big masses of perennials to give it kind of a cottagey effect. So I sprayed off all the turf with Roundup and then rototilled the entire front yard. And it looked great once it was rototilled, but again, there had been laying dormant all these weed seeds. So I rototilled it, and then shortly, rained, and shortly thereafter, the entire front yard was covered in weeds. I sprayed them again, started over. But and then I started planting, and I still had weed problems, so I had to do a lot of, the whole idea of a cottage garden was a nice idea, but in the end, until it was really established, it was a huge amount of work to get it established because there were so many weed seed in the soil. So we, like you do here, you have access to a lot of retail growers, wholesale growers. We have a big wholesaler near us called Russell's Perennials, and they grow about 800 different perennials. So I got, I think, 1,200 gallon-sized perennials from them. You can see here, there's the dogwood, which is still there today. There's the garage, the Japanese maple, and the Norway spruces in the back. And so the idea was just to have not a lot of variety, but have kind of repeating masses of things. So there was some Siberian iris, Heuchera villosa, Gora, Trinia scabiosifolia, Alchemilla, Geranium Johnson's blue. And I would say of all that stuff that was planted 15 years ago, I can't think of one thing that's still there today. It's gone through, I mean, it's still kind of a cottagey field, but it's gone through so many iterations. And then I did a kind of an irregular stone walkway down through here. So that actually was probably, that was planted in the fall. That was probably actually the next spring. So here's a Geranium Johnson's blue, Alchemilla. This is a Nepida siberica souvenir de André Cedron, Centauria. But with perennials are meant to stay around for years on end, and some do. Like Alchemilla is truly perennial, the Geranium's truly perennial. But like the Nepida got choked out. For us, the Gora really this is Gora here, needs better drainage, so it didn't stay around for very long. And then some things like the Petrinia seeded all over the gardens. That was a mistake. The Amsonia, which you can't see here, Kubricktii, that's one of the things that's still there. And this, I actually put in, it's hard to see, but I had a walkway here, and I did irregular stone, and it kind of sloped away from the house, but the slope was so much that when it rained, all the grit, or the sand in between the stones, kept washing out. So then I had my crew come over, and they did a new stone walkway, and we did kind of this round landing, and then a step, and that's really fixed the problem. But probably about 5 years into living there, first this Japanese maple started to die. It got verticillium wilt, and you could just see the verticillium wilt kind of going from property to property to property, kind of slowly killing each tree on each property. And that one eventually died. And then the one in the back, which is even more beautiful, succumbed as well. And on the house, I have a bunch of vines. This is Decumaria barbara, Parthenocissus henriana. On the right side is a Schizophragma and Parthenocissus Fenway Park. I don't do a lot of annuals out front, but I have some. Like this is Talinum, Kingswood Gold, Jewels of Opar. So when this tree died, the way I had it set up was kind of meadowy, sunny stuff on the left and shade stuff on the right. Well, once this died, it became full sun. So then the whole right side had to be redone. That's kind of early on. There's the Petrinia, which is a beautiful plant, but just seeded around too much. And then I have a friend at the Arboretum. She's a volunteer, and she walks by my house. She said, the front of your house is nice, but it needs some lawn. Because I never had lawn. It was just all, big masses of things. And she was actually right. With two little kind of spits of lawn, it actually sets off the things that are in the yard a little bit better, makes it look a little less chaotic. And then what I tried to do here is there's a garden up in Quebec called La Cotte-Vente, and it's Frank Cabot made the garden. And I went up there and I saw that he had in his lawn a little kind of cylinder of water, and it looked like a bottomless pit. So I thought, I'm going to do that at my house in Swarthmore. So I got this long tubular insert, cut a hole in, stuck that in there, filled it with water. Well, at the first lawn cutting, it got filled with grass clippings, so that didn't look so attractive. And then it became the main hub for, I think, West Nile virus. So that's long gone. That little bit of lawn is still there. And then I put in some shrubs out front, because I thought with just herbaceous plants, that's a lot of kind of plants of the same stature and texture. And I really felt like it needed some woody plants to set off the herbaceous plants. So these are Lindera glauca variety salicifolia. And then I put a Katsura tree in here. To some degree, I wanted plants that were really unusual, but on the other hand, I also wanted plants that I really like. So like the Katsura is not particularly unusual, but it's a plant that I've always appreciated and thought I would like one in my yard. This is since that guy, it was a beautiful tree, 25 feet tall, and then got a girdling root and died. So my track record with trees in the front yard is not so hot. This is a little later on. Over the years, I've bought several pieces of furniture made by Dan Benarsik. He's a gardener at Chanticleer. And in addition to doing gardening, he does woodwork. So I probably have about 15 pieces of his furniture, tables, etc. Spread throughout the garden. This picture is probably not too long ago. The alchemil is still there. And then on this little bit of walkway that goes to the front of the house, there's 4 Daphne Carol Mackeys that kind of flank the entrance to the house. There's a trochodendron here. And then where the Japanese maple came out, this became more sunny things, and it's same today. There's Monarda, Echinacea, some Joe Pye weed, ironweed, Rudbeckia maxima on that side. So you can see a little bit of lawn on the right, a little on the left. Here's the Amsonia Hubrichtii. I have a bunch of different alliums. These are Purple Sensation. This is Christophii. Here's another shrub that I put in, Rus, Tiger Eyes. And then some of the shrubs along the house have grown up. This is Clethra acuminata, Mahonia japonica. There's a Chimonanthus praecox in here. Oh, and then I don't know when they went in, but I put window boxes all along the windows of the first story. There's only windows in the back on the back dormer. And I thought to do window boxes on a second floor windows would be too much of a hassle to water them. This is, if you haven't grown this Lindera, Glauca salicifolia, has the most incredible fall color, almost as like a pumpkin orange. And then eventually it turns almost like a taupe color for the winter. And my leaves are still on my plants at home, and then they eventually fall off probably by the end of April and just push out new leaves. And this is Salvia splendens vancoutii. That's tender. I do a few containers on the front stoop, but most of them are in the back part of the garden. Also, you'll see in a bit, I found this young guy at a local arboretum who was beginning, he's just started a business, his own metalsmith shop. So I had him make the mailbox, which has kind of an oak leaf and ginkgo leaf motif.
What was the pink-looking grass by the door down there?
This here, that's Hacknacloa in the fall. So Hacknacloa, the Hakone grass, is a shade-loving grass. Actually gets really nice fall color with kind of yellows, pinks, and orange. It's like a perennial, but here it's in a pot. Here you can see the mailbox here. De Kumaria, this vine gets nice fall color, almost kind of this whitish cream color. And then the Amsonia Hubrichtii gets really fine fall color as well. This is Cornus cardinal. There's also, you can see it blooming a little bit here, is Hamamelis Yelena. It's kind of the coppery colored witch hazel. This side of my property is really kind of the utilitarian side of the property. There's, you'll see in another picture, there's an air conditioner here. So luckily all that kind of stuff, the air conditioner, the gas meter, some of the drainage is all, and where the trash cans are, is all on one side of the property. So you know, I did just a little bit of screening in there just to shroud it a little bit. So this is the guy, Matthew Harris, and so this is like a little old rickety arbor that connected the garage to the house. So I contracted with him and his father. His father did the woodwork, and then Matthew did the metal work. So and the braces for the upright were going to be in an oak leaf and acorn motif, and then he was going to make a gate here as well. So here's all the metal work. It's all in cedar. And the gate as well. This grass is an annual. That's a Pennisetum Cetaceum rubrum. Back here is the giant papyrus. These are Cordyline australis. Then one thing I did is, here's that garage again. But the driveway went all the way back to the garage, and I'm sure every one of you has a driveway, right? Does anybody not have a driveway? Okay. So, you know, most driveways, you know, unless you go down and turn around in them, they're really a big waste of space. You know, if it's 200 feet long, you only park, at least I do, I just park you know, in the front part of it, especially if you, like I have a garage that you can't use. I mean, if you're driving to a garage, that's one thing, but a lot of people I know that have garages, they're filled with everything but a car. So I thought, you know, I have all this space, I never drive to the garage, so I'm going to take up half of the driveway and plant lawn and do some other garden beds. So that's what I did initially, still thinking that eventually, if I could afford it, I would turn this garage into some sort of outdoor room. Also, here's Cupressus arizonica blue pyramid. Here's the gate. This is Schizophragma hydrangea Moonlight. So that's on the north side of the house. And then the very back of the property, these are those tall Norway spruces. I thought, you know, this would be a nice spot for kind of a woodland garden. I had that big Japanese maple there. This is an old abandoned barbecue grill. And I thought that could be, you know, kind of repurposed into maybe a source of water for a pond here. And then I could do stepping stones through here. I also felt like I needed to replace the fences all the way around were really poor condition. So this is putting out stone dust for a stepping stone path. This is trenching electric out for the pump for the waterfall. There's the pond finish, and then I have a friend who's a boat builder in Maine, and he needed some work, so he has family in Swarthmore, so he came down and he built this fence for me, and has kind of a little arts and crafts motif on the top. But you know, when you build a fence, you're supposed to put the nice looking side to the neighbor side. It'll be neighborly, but I wanted the nice side towards me. So what he did is the fence actually has some depth to it, so much so that there's a nice side on the neighbor's side, and then it's duplicated on my side. So it's kind of double the fence, but we both ended up with a good-looking fence. And then I just started planting kind of woodland-type plants. And in the beginning, just to fill the space, I did a lot of different ferns, epimediums, acerums, stuff that I could buy kind of in mass, but was still somewhat unusual. So today what I'm doing is starting to take up some of those older masses of things and put in more special things like little epimediums from Plant Delights or different gingers or different tricertus and so on. So, you know, for the first several years it was just kind of getting things planted to hold the space, and now I can kind of refine it over time. Daphne-phyllum, which you're probably familiar with, has turned out to be a fantastic plant for dry shade. And that's what it kind of looks like today, although the Japanese maple died, so that had to be replaced. Here's 3 of those cryptomerias that I planted originally back here. That's actually more current because the tree got replaced by yellowwood, Cladrastis kentuckia, some cucubas, some different alyssiums mixed in. It's hard to see it, but here's the pond here, and then the plant, and then there's a pathway that goes around the pond. That's looking from the pond back towards the house. There's the yellowwood here. That's Hacknacloa all gold, which I use quite a bit in the garden. Then the window boxes, I usually do different things every year. This is one of the kind of species and patiens. And they're on all sides. They're on the shady north side, the semi-shady east side, the partially sunny west side, and the full sun south side. So it's fun to play around with different annuals in those pots, both in the pots and the window boxes. That's on the south side. That's Icomia Sweet Caroline and Angelonia. And I had this huge window box on the backside of my picture window, and so I did cactus in there and junk that I bought here and there. This was the big tropical border I did for years along the garage. And then I did one on the opposite side. These are those, it's hard to see, but Carpinus Fransfontaine. This border has changed the most. I think I've changed it 5 times in the 15 years I've been there. At first I wanted it to be kind of a Christopher Lloyd mixed shrub and perennial and annuals. And then I put in the hedge of the Carpinus, and then it got too shady. Then I put in these boxwoods because I thought it needed more structure, and then the boxwoods got too big. Then they started dying out because it's actually kind of a low spot down in here. So now it's actually just a simple design border, only has about 12 different plants, and everything's in kind of large repeating masses. There's a couple of hollies mixed in here. So it has a lot more structure than it ever did. So this was, when it was quasi Great Dixter border. You can see the Japanese maple here actually dying, tropicals here. It gives you a sense of the lay of the land. This is the garage, which is kind of 2 cars deep. The woodland garden, perennial border, and patio. So in its heyday, that Japanese maple is really quite something. And one of my favorite tropical plants are the red Abyssinian banana, Enseti ventricosa morellii. I also have now, I used to have these 2 mirrors, now I just have one big mirror back here that gives it kind of almost a trompe-l'oeil effect, where you look down towards the end of the property, see the mirror, it gives illusion that you're looking farther than you actually are. I had this little circular patio put in as kind of a little destination area. This is a little cutting garden at the end of the garage. This again is that Hacknacloa all gold. These are just little tillandsia sitting on the table, little air plants, and this is a Neoregelia called Fireball. Oak-leaf hydrangeas in the background. And again, the garage, which I think had potential. So I did use it as kind of an outdoor seating area, although it was it was falling apart, but it provided a little shelter when you were out in the garden. Oops. Those again are the red Abyssinian bananas. Another chair by Dan Benarsi. So I have a friend who knew an architect who was just starting his practice, and he said, why don't you contact Mark, and maybe he'll do some design for you for the garage. And I thought, it can't hurt to contact him. And he actually, because he was starting to do practice, didn't charge very much for the design. So his idea was to put a window on the garage door and on a cupola, which I wasn't too keen on. And then there would be French doors that would open into the garden on the garden side and then on the back side as well. And then he did a model. So once he did the model, it was like, I want to do this. And luckily, it was like 5-6 years ago when you could walk into a bank and they would give you like $150,000. It was during that area where getting a loan was really easy. Which I'm not saying was a good thing, but if it wasn't during that area, I don't think the summer house would have come to fruition. So, and I even thought that if I couldn't afford to do it, I could at least take all the wood off of the garage and make it into like a neat ruin garden or something like that. But, so things kind of did get into place, and I was able to get a home equity line of credit, and I was able to find a builder that could do the work. So in, it was probably maybe 7 years ago, in January, they started demolishing the building, and the idea was all the stone would be left, more or less, and then all the wood part of it would be rebuilt. So they took up the concrete floor. So I even thought, if I didn't do the summer house, that this could have been a pretty interesting ruin garden. It was an incredible mess. And I knew that it had to be done by, it was like June 1st, because every year for my curatorial intern at the Arboretum, I have a big party for the outcome. It's a year-long position. So I knew on June 1st I was having the party, so it had to be done by then. So the idea is that there'd be French doors here, French doors here. This would be kind of open-aired. This end would be, they'd punch a hole through the wall so you can enter here. This would be kind of gravelly, kind of Mediterranean. This would still be the tropicals down here. The floor is interesting. It's a poured, stained concrete floor that almost looks like leather. One thing I didn't count on, well, I didn't count on several things. I knew how much it was going to cost up front. I forgot that if you have a building, you have to put something in it, like furniture. And I'm sure you've all been through this, so they tell you what the quote is. And then they come back to you and they say, well, you can either get these type of lights, or you can do these really nice ones. Or you can, when it came to the windows, they're like, you can buy like Anderson windows, or I know this cabinet maker that can make handmade windows. So like every option was like, that's the option I wanted, was the one that cost more. And then it's not that big of a building. So I kept doing the upgrades, and then they're like, not included in the cost of it is painting it. And I thought, well, how much could it cost to paint a little building like that? Any guess? $13,000. Because it was all like every window had to be taken off. You know, they had to paint. You know, every little, in between every little pane, and everything needed three layers of paint. So I think in the end, it actually cost more than my house. So then I just started backfilling with tropicals. I mean, in the end, it really turned out, it exceeded my expectations. So that's kind of before, that's after. What it looks like on the inside. So it is a great kind of mosquito-free space in the summertime. Like around us, like people on the weekends, they either go to the mountains, like the Poconos, or they go to the beach, or they call it the shore, summer place there. I only have to go like 8 steps to get to my summer house. That's, probably was close to it being finished. So there's a little circular gravel patio here. And then on the inside of these walls, there's crushed gravel as well. And I have some Mexican shrubby oaks in there that need a little bit more protection. I have a Bischophia polycarpa here, and some, kind of choicer things on the inside of the walls. And this is covered on the back side and open on the front side. And then a lot more, agaves, dichias, cactus. This is, saw some little plants of this today, Solanum quitoense. And the colors of it kind of match the house colors, but they're all in reverse. Like on the house, the trim is more the grayish color. This is still here, this dogwood. This is Salvia Leucantha. For us, it's tender. A monkey my mom gave to me. She found it. We have a little old-fashioned hardware store in Swarthmore, and they claim that you can buy anything there. And I guess it's true since they sell large fiberglass monkeys there. And she got it for 25 bucks, not bad. So he's held up pretty well over the years. And this is all tropicals, Alocasia portadora, different cannas, large bromeliads.
Are those all in the ground, and then
These are all in the ground, yes.
And then you pot them up in the winter?
Well, a lot of stuff like, say, this is all alternanthera, coleus. If I keep those, I might do a cutting of those, but usually don't even do that. All the cannas and elephant ears just get cut to the ground, dug up, put in a pot with maybe a little bit of mulch or shredded bark mulch, and they just sit kind of quasi-dormant in the basement. The only thing I would actually pot up and bring in might be like the bromeliads or the agaves, things that really don't die back. Here's the hedge that separates patio from the summer house. That's kind of what it looks like today. I mean, not today, but in this year it'll look like that. I love this. This is another air plant, Tillandsia xerographica. These chairs, my friend Dan Benarsik made those also. So that brings us to kind of current day, and you know, one of the problems with a small garden is you ultimately run out of space. You know, you just can't go anymore. So for several years, I had been eyeing up my neighbor's yard, and you know, I knew what they did back in the very back, and from what I could tell, they didn't do much of anything. So I thought, you know, maybe if I come up with a plan and approach them and kind of eliminate any points that could be contentious or problematic, that I might get them to go forward with ideas. So because I had done vegetable gardening as a kid and my grandfathers were farmers, I really wanted a bigger vegetable garden than I had in that little plot. So this essentially is a third of their property. It's 40 by 100. This is the back fence here. Their house is kind of like where the red dot is, kind of down here. So, and they've been good friends. They've been there the whole time I've been there. So in January of 12, I guess, I went to them and I had the plan. I said, you know, I'll do all the work. I'll pay for everything. I'll you know, plant everything. I'll weed everything. All you have to do is partake in the harvest and let me do it in your backyard. And they're pretty, you know, they're pretty laid back, and I didn't see any potential problems with it becoming a legal issue. I mean, one problem could be they would move, and then, you know, I wouldn't have access to their backyard anymore. So they seemed pretty keen on the idea that it would be this kind of joint communal garden between the two properties, and we'd definitely have enough vegetables for both of us. There was a plan for chickens here, a little communal table in the center, berries. The whole garden would be surrounded with Thuya green giant hedge. My idea is it would be almost like a secret garden. This is my property. The woodland garden's kind of here. And there would be a gate here, but you couldn't really see into the garden unless you looked through these little holes that are now on the gate. So from my side, unless you know that's over there, you wouldn't know it's there unless you look through the little peepholes. Also came equipped with a color plan because I thought that would help seal the deal. And we call it Vassar Farm because we live on Vassar Avenue. And also, she had already this old foundation of a garage, so we also did a little design to show how that could be incorporated with this. And she has a lower gate here, and then this is all crushed gravel paths, which has been changed a little bit. So that's what it looked like. So I thought, she's not doing anything back there. The ironic thing is, and this is in residential Swarthmore, this lady, there's a chain link fence here. She has goats. She has 2 geese. She already had chickens. So it seemed like this would fit in perfectly there. So we just did initially, and I thought also for my landscaping crew, because I like to keep them employed through the winter, this would be a project where they would have something to do in the winter. We could keep, really good notes, and then if somebody wanted to do this, we would have good numbers on how much the different components would cost. So we had to move the shed, we moved a couple trees. Most of the back of the property was all that brush and brambles, so we had to do a lot of clearing, leveling. tree, the weeping cherry that had to be moved. The soil was pretty good because I think it just kind of laid fallow for decades. And even after it was tilled, it actually looked level, but it was about a foot lower in one corner versus the other, so we had to move quite a bit of soil. And then because it was very strong, kind of rectilinear spaces, it took a lot of work to lay it out and get all the beds just so. And then where the gravel path is, we put in a metal edging to kind of maintain the rectilinear spaces. That's Eric, who actually did the design, laying it out with flags and string. And then my girlfriend and I we were doing all the, getting the seeds and everything, learning about raising chickens and so forth. So when we were ready, and the spring came around, here's George and Marcelino doing more layout. This is the paths going in. Here's some of the metal edging. So this all went in kind of January 2012. It was probably done around early May. So it's all surrounded with Thuya green giant, which would be a clipped hedge at about 6 feet tall. Here's crushed gravel. This is where the communal table will go. And I had 3 of those containers, but I needed a 4th. I was over to a friend's house for dinner, and I know she had one on her porch. So I had to make a deal for it, and I got one that was pretty close. There's a chicken house going in. Garden coming together. We put a little outdoor shed that we found on Craigslist. These are all strawberries that line the main path. Raspberries, blueberries. There's asparagus down here. Around here, the 4 Asian persimmons, Diospyros khaki. Compost pile here. That was another great thing about this. The compost used to be in my yard. Now it's in their yard. As are the somewhat smelly chickens from time to time. So you can see she has a low, kind of purplish blue gate, and my gate is more imposing red gate. Of course, you have to get chickens. We didn't get them from Stromberg's. I didn't want to get chicks because you can't get real variety. You have to buy several chicks of one type at a time, and then you have to raise them. You have to pay much more attention to them than I had time for. So again, on Craigslist, we found a lady that would sell pullets, and we were able to get 6 different kinds initially. And this little run was not big enough, so now it's more expanded. It kind of goes over here. And then the communal table, I had Dan Benarsic again make that. The top is ginkgo. The base is Chamaecyparis thioides. Here's the persimmons here. There's the table finished, red gate down here. And that's what that's what it looked like last summer. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
So we're all invited, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have lots of garden tours. Usually I have cold beer. So
Seriously, what kind of tour arrangements or schedule?
Yeah, well, actually last year a group from Jc Raulston came there, so I have groups that come, but I also have interested people. Really, if any of you ever are up in that area,
we're going to have to do a trip. All
right, but even so, if you're just by yourself, get my information from Mark and email me. I'd love to have you. Anybody else? Yes.
What you just I visited up in that part of southeastern Pennsylvania a lot, but I don't think I really paid that much attention to the plants. You described it as Zone 7, but maybe 8 in the sheltered area.
Right.
And yet the plant palette there looks quite a bit different than here. It doesn't sound, cold hardiness zone-wise all that different. And is that due to milder?
I mean, you guys are probably a zone warmer. Like the stuff that we struggle with is, especially like in this winter, is you can grow a lot of southeastern Asian broadleaf evergreens here that we can't grow, and then you can also grow like agaves and certain yuccas and kind of southwestern stuff outside that we really can't grow. So I'd say that's one difference. You just a lot of it. I think drainage soil-wise we're probably comparable, but like you have out here Sassafras Suzumu, which I've killed multiple times. You have an X-Bucklandia out there, killed that multiple times. So there's things that I see down here that I've never seen growing in the Philadelphia area. But we always, or at least I do, I keep trying to grow those. So, I think what's great about at least the campus of Swarthmore College where the Scott Arboretum is, there's incredible microclimates created by courtyards and big buildings and so forth that you can get you can push the zone maybe a zone.
And so things like the Carol Mackey Daphne, which seems sort of unimaginable here. I don't know if people ever do grow those.
Well, we're probably a little, for things like that, we're a little, not much, but we're a little cooler. So, I think there's probably things that we can do a little better than you can do just because we don't have the extended heat that you guys have. Although it's really pretty similar. But even between like Philadelphia and Washington D.C., which is only 100 miles, it is significant what they can grow, say at the National Arboretum, which we can't grow in Swarthmore. But then on the flip side, if you go 100 miles to the north to New York, there's a difference there as well. So it's pretty dramatic. And even Chanticleer, which is 10 miles from us, but we're about 200 feet above sea level, and Chanticleer is 400. So they bloom all their bloom sequence is about a week after us. So it's quite a big jump just in the immediate area.
Andrew,
Yes.
You've been going and collecting in some areas. Has that changed your plant palette at your house?
It hasn't yet, but that's kind of the direction I want to go. Is it took those 15 years to kind of get the spaces sorted out, get them defined, get something growing there, and then I think what I'd like to do over the next 15 years is just a lot of the shrubs and stuff have gotten too big, so I've just been ripping those out, putting newer, choicer things in, and I would like to have, a lot of that stuff is not quite big enough, but when it's big enough to have some of that, or at least a reasonable amount of that represented in this garden. And then there's other days I wish I just lived in an apartment. Maybe about half the days. Yes.
On that note, Andrew, about how many hours do you generally spend a week in your garden? And what's your philosophy for soil modification?
Other than with the soil, what I do is we get leaf compost from the township. So a lot of the beds get top dressed with that. That's the only thing I've ever done to really kind of change the soil. If I'm in a pinch, like this year I was traveling, and so again I cheated and had my crew come in and do like a spring cleanup, get everything ready. But say I don't do that, it would probably take me like most of the weekend, Saturday, Sunday in March, to get everything cleaned up, edged. because I cut all the beds with a spade and then leaf compost or mulch. And then once everything's kind of set, the next big wave is all the tropicals. So I can do probably the tropicals in the beds and all the containers in a weekend. And then and then the vegetable garden is, that I do more kind of piecemeal. When I have like a half hour, I'll do a few rows. Once everything's planted with the vegetable garden and the rest of the garden, I basically only do like mornings for an hour, at evening. I think the thing is to do it constantly and consistently. Otherwise, if you wait a couple weeks, go on vacation, then it's so overwhelming. But even if you do for 15 minutes, you can get quite a bit done. Anybody else? Yes.
What kind of critter issues do you face, or how do you manage deer, rabbits, and bulls especially?
In the backyard, I have been getting deer. So the whole backyard has either that big wooden fence, and then on the sides has like a plastic deer fence. And then in the vegetable garden, it's a smaller deer fence, about to the height of the hedge, about 5.5, 6 feet, and that's been fine. One of the big problems last year was groundhog. And they'll go under, climb over. They're really the hardest thing to control. And then occasionally rabbits. I think those are the main ones. All the same here, right? Deer, rabbits, woodchucks. Squirrel. Yeah, I don't have too much problem with squirrels. We have a lot of raptors around, a lot of hawks, and I think they help control the squirrels. And the chickens I only let out at night. I don't let them roam all day long because they would be, I think a lot of things would attack them. Yes?
I was thinking, ginkgo wood in that table, was that like lumber? Or?
Yeah, he found it through a purveyor, like a middleman that deals with different types of wood. And that's where he found the base as well, which is the white cedar, Camrycypris thyoides, which grows through kind of the coastal plain. But the ginkgo, they were big pieces, so a fairly sizable ginkgo must have had to come down to on the top, and the tops of the bench. The benches were also ginkgo. Yeah, what that was is he took an acetylene tank and cut it in half, and then put them end to end to make this kind of half-round, long trough. And then I've planted it with like hens and chicks and sedums and things like that. Yes.
You ever take some time to go see the Eagles and the Phillies and
Phillies. I've never been to an Eagles game, but I'm much more of a baseball fan. I mean, that's another thing I like doing is, in the evening I like listening to a Phillies game, drinking a couple beers, and gardening at the same time. Yeah, I'm not just, boring plant guy. All right. Thanks a lot.